Most founders think fundraising is about having a brilliant idea, but investors see brilliant ideas every single day. What actually separates funded startups from ignored ones is usually something far less exciting: process. The founders who consistently raise capital tend to treat fundraising like a system. They understand timing, positioning, psychology, momentum, and leverage. And once you see fundraising that way, a lot of confusing investor behavior suddenly starts making sense. The full PDF playbook is linked below if you want to study the deeper framework later. But first, let's break down the parts that actually move around forward. In this video, we're covering the fundraising process from the inside out. Not just pitching, but how top founders build investor pipelines, structure decks that convert, create momentum, and negotiate terms without accidentally giving away control of the company. And if this kind of practical business breakdown is useful to you, subscribe and turn notifications on. We're going much deeper into how these systems work in real companies, not just in startup theory. The first mindset shift is this: fundraising is not asking for money. It's selling an investment opportunity. That sounds small, but it changes everything. The strongest founders don't approach investors with desperation. They approach them with structure. Meetings become part of a process. Follow-ups become intentional. Every conversation is designed to move the investor toward a clearer commitment. This is why elite founders often run fundraising almost like enterprise sales. They track conversations, objections, timelines, and next steps obsessively, because momentum matters more than excitement. A great first meeting means nothing if the process stalls afterward, and this leads directly into the investor pipeline itself. Most founders target way too few investors. They'll speak to 5 or 10 firms, get rejected, and assume the market isn't interested. In reality, fundraising is partly a numbers game. Serious founders often build lists of 50 to 100 investors who specifically match their stage and sector. But here's the important part: not all introductions are equal. Warm intros massively outperform cold outreach because trust transfers before the meeting even starts. Airbnb is a classic example. Early on, they struggled to convince investors the business was scalable. What changed wasn't just the pitch, it was getting into the right networks and building credibility through the right people. That access accelerated everything. And honestly, this is where many founders quietly lose momentum. They spend months perfecting the product, but almost no time building investor relationships before they actually need capital. Once the pipeline is working, the next job is making the deck convert. Most weak pitch decks start with features. Strong decks start with pain. Investors need to immediately understand why the problem matters and why the timing matters now. Then comes the slide investors care about most: traction. Because traction reduces uncertainty. It's one thing to claim people want the product. It's another thing to show retention, revenue growth, usage, or customer demand already happening in the market. Dropbox understood this early. Their demo video generated massive waitlist growth before the product was fully mature. The lesson wasn't just marketing, it was proving demand before asking investors to believe projections. And one more thing founders consistently underestimate: clarity of the ask. If the meeting ends and the investor still doesn't know how much you're raising, what milestones the capital unlocks, or what happens next, the process weakens immediately. I'm curious whether you've seen this happen yourself, because unclear positioning is one of the most common fundraising mistakes founders don't notice in real time. Now here's where fundraising becomes psychological. Scarcity changes investor behavior. A slow, open-ended process kills urgency, but a structured parallel process where multiple investors are moving simultaneously creates momentum and decision pressure naturally. The dangerous mistake is looking too available. The second investors feel there's unlimited time, urgency disappears. This is why founders protect runway carefully during fundraising, not to manipulate investors, but because leverage disappears the moment desperation becomes visible. And when the first serious term sheet arrives, the dynamic changes completely. One committed investor often attracts others because perceived risk suddenly drops. But this brings us to the part many founders misunderstand most: term sheets. Valuation gets all the attention, but experienced founders know control terms matter far more over time. Liquidation preferences, voting rights, board structure, these can completely change the outcome years later. A clean deal with fair terms is often far better than a flashy valuation with hidden restrictions attached. This mistake looks smart while you're making it. Higher valuation feels like winning until the structure starts limiting future decisions. That's why experienced startup lawyers matter so much. Not general lawyers. People who see startup deals constantly and know where founders usually get trapped. And ultimately, this is the core lesson behind all of fundraising. It's not about charisma. It's not about sounding visionary for 30 minutes. Fundraising is a disciplined process that creates confidence, momentum, and leverage step by step. So, subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this, and if you want the deeper fundraising framework, templates, and investor process behind everything we covered today, the full PDF playbook is linked below.